The day a cop put a gun in my face on the side of a city street, I was wearing a silk dress and kneeling on gravel, and the only thing running through my head was my dad's voice telling me calm as ever, "Your dignity can be rebuilt, your life cannot." The wild part is that the man screaming at me had no idea who my father was or how badly he was about to blow up his own life. My name is Chloe Washington, and yeah, this actually happened. I was 28, driving across town in a bright acid-green Lamborghini Huracan, the kind of car people take pictures of at stoplights, and I know how that sounds already, but let me give you the full picture before you decide who you think I am. I grew up on both sides of this city, if that makes sense. My mom was a public school teacher, the kind who bought her kids extra notebooks out of her own paycheck. My dad came from nothing, worked his way up until he ended up as the state attorney general, the top prosecutor in our state. The guy politicians pretend not to be afraid of when the cameras are on. I went to good schools, I worked hard, I built my own career in the arts world, started a non-profit to bring art and legal literacy programs into neighborhoods the city pretends not to see. And that day, I had $10,000 in cash in a manila envelope inside my Hermes clutch money. I was planning to use at a charity gallery auction to buy a painting from a young artist for our annual fundraiser. It was a hot afternoon, the kind of heat that makes the air shimmer above the pavement, and I'd stopped for gas on the east side at this old beat-up station with peeling paint, dusty windows, and a guy behind bulletproof glass who barely looked up when you walked in. I pulled back onto the road, turned up the AC, checked my lipstick in the rear view, already thinking about tiny canapes and sparkling water and art, and that's when the world flashed red and blue behind me. Now, if you've never been pulled over in a car that costs more than some people's houses while being black in a part of town, cops like to call problematic. I don't know how to explain the specific kind of tired that hits you. Your stomach doesn't exactly drop, it just sinks like, here we go again, you know what I mean? I checked my speed, dead on the limit, signaled, pulled over smoothly, put the car in park, hands visible on the wheel like my father drilled into me at 16. He always said, never give them an excuse, Chloe, not even a flimsy one. I watched the patrol car in the mirror, watched the driver's door open like a stage cue. He got out slow, like he knew people might be watching, like he wanted them to. Sergeant Rick Dean, mid to late 30s, pale pudgy from years of drive-through food and sitting in a cruiser uniform shirt, straining at the buttons, jaw clenched around whatever resentment he wakes up with every morning. He did that walk some officers do, hand resting casually on the butt of his Glock, but not casual at all, more like a promise. I lowered my window just enough to talk, not enough for him to stick his hand inside, and the cold air from my car spilled into the heavy heat outside like a barrier. "Afternoon, ma'am," he drawled, but it came with a smirk, not courtesy. His eyes swept the dash, the interior, the leather, then me, lingering on my chest longer than any professional should before he looked at my face. "License and registration." No explanation, no, "Do you know why I stopped you?" Just command. I kept my voice even. "Of course, officer, can you tell me why I was pulled over?" I said, moving slow, deliberate, reaching for the glove compartment. He ignored the question, took the documents, let his fingers brush mine in that greasy, subtle way people use when they want you to know they're in control of the space between you. He glanced at my license. "Chloe," he said, butchering my name on purpose. "Chloe Washington, that's an interesting name." Then he looked back at the car. "Whole lot of vehicle for a little lady like you must have a very generous friend." The implication hung in the air like a bad smell. He started tapping my license against his thigh rhythmically, like a metronome for my patience. "You were driving erratically back there," he lied, gesturing vaguely behind us. "Weaving in your lane looked like you were in a real hurry to get somewhere that's reckless driving territory, big fine, mandatory court date, maybe an impound, your insurance company's gonna have a field day." I knew it was complete fiction, he knew it, but this was clearly something he'd done before, throw a bunch of serious-sounding words out, let them swirl around with the sirens and the gun and the uniform and wait for fear to do the rest. I listened, let him finish his little speech about how terrible my life might become because I drove straight and obeyed the speed limit in the wrong zip code. Then I took a breath. "I understand the process, officer," I said. "If you believe I committed an infraction, please write the ticket. I have an excellent attorney and I'm confident we can resolve it in court." It was like I slapped him with a velvet glove. This was not the script he wanted. He was used to excuses, tearful apologies, nervous questions about, is there anything we can do right here? Not a woman in a silk dress telling him to document his lie and see her lawyer. His mouth curled into something mean. "An attorney, huh?" he scoffed. That's going to cost you more than this ticket. I'm just trying to be a nice guy here, trying to save you a whole lot of trouble. Sometimes a little community contribution can make these kinds of problems disappear. We show a little goodwill. Everyone gets on with their day. There it was, the ask dressed up as civic duty. He didn't care about safety or reckless driving. He wanted cash. I met his eyes. I don't contribute to communities that operate outside the law, officer. I said, letting a bit of steel show. Please either write the citation or let me go. I have somewhere to be. That's the moment everything turned. You could feel it the way the air between us shifted, the way his eyes went from smug to something sharp and ugly. My calm wasn't playing the role he'd assigned me in his head, and men like that, men whose power is built on intimidation and ego, they do not like when their stage directions get ignored. His polite mask dropped. "Get out of the car," he said, voice low and flat. My heart thumped once hard like it was warning me, this is the part you tell stories about later if you survive. "Is there a lawful reason for that request, Sergeant?" I asked, still very careful, still trying to keep us inside some kind of rules. He leaned down so close I could feel his breath on my cheek. "You deaf, or do people like you just think you're too special to follow orders?" he hissed out of the car now. "People like you. You know exactly what that meant." I did the math fast, like my dad had trained me to do. Stay seated and risk him yanking the door open or step out and at least keep some control over my body language. I put the car in park, unbuckled, stepped out slowly, the sun hitting the emerald silk of my dress, the gravel crunching under my heels. Standing, I was actually a couple inches taller than him, which only made him angrier. You could see it in the way his jaw clenched tighter. He stepped right up into my space. "You think you can roll into my part of town in your ridiculous little spaceship talking to me like you're in a boardroom?" he spit. "You think your fancy attorney is going to help you out here? I am the law, I am the judge and the jury." And right now the judge is real pissed off. Then I heard this tiny sound that somehow felt louder than the sirens earlier. The quiet snap of the retention strap on his holster. His hand dropped, wrapped around the grip, and in one smooth practice motion he pulled his gun. He held it low near his thigh, but when someone with a badge and a chip on their shoulder pulls a loaded weapon out over a traffic stop, you don't really care where the muzzle is pointing. All you see is the end of your story. "You think you're better than me," he growled, eyes bright with that feverish light some people get when their power rush hits. "Let's see how high and mighty you are now on your knees." Every instinct in my body screamed, no. Every muscle wanted to turn and run to fight, to do anything other than kneel in front of this man. But my father's words were louder. "Your life cannot be replaced. Chloe, everything else can be rebuilt. Swallow your pride and survive." So I did it. I sank down slow, feeling the sharp teeth of the gravel bite through the thin fabric into my skin knees, burning, heart-racing eyes fixed on a little oil stain on the pavement because I refused to look up and give him the satisfaction of seeing fear there even though it was definitely there. He loomed over me, shadow cutting out the sun. "That's better," he sneered. "A pretty thing like you in a car like this. You must be used to being on your knees for a man, right? But this time you're not getting a tip, you're paying a fine." Humiliation feels physical, like heat rising from your chest to your scalp, like your skin doesn't fit right anymore. For a second, I wanted to scream at him, spit, tell him exactly who my father was, but something in me clicked over into this cold, focused place instead. If all he wanted was fear, I could give him a taste of that if it meant I got out alive. "Please," I said quietly, letting my shoulders hunch, letting my voice tremble just enough. "Please don't hurt me. What do you want?" He relaxed just a little. You could see it in his shoulders. That's what he'd been chasing that moment, where he could tell himself he'd won. "What do I want?" he chuckled. "I'm sure a woman like you doesn't go cruising around without a little walking around money. Why don't we start with that purse in your seat?" I swallowed, chose my words carefully. "My clutch is on the passenger seat." I said, eyes on the gravel. "I have 10,000 in cash. I was going to buy a painting. Please just take it and let me go." 10,000. The exact number from that text he'd gotten from his bookie, the one I didn't know about then but learned later. He told me to stand, move slow, get it, so I did every inch of movement measured. I opened the car door, picked up the clutch, pulled out the envelope thick with hundreds, and turned back, holding it out like an offering. He snatched it, rifled through the bills, eyes going almost glassy with greed, then shoved it deep into his cargo pocket. "Now that wasn't so hard, was it?" he said, gun still in his hand, but his focus already shifting. Get back in your car and get the hell out of my city if I ever see you or this vehicle again. It won't be a fine, you're paying, you understand me? Yes, I whispered, because that was the only safe answer. I understand. I got back into the Lamborghini, shut the door, turned the engine on with shaking hands and drove away. Not fast, just steady, watching the road, not the mirror counting my breaths all the way across town. By the time I pulled into a quiet downtown parking garage, the adrenaline that had kept me upright started leaking out of my bones. I parked, cut the engine, and everything went so silent it roared. I put my forehead on the steering wheel and let myself brake for exactly 1 minute. 1 solid minute of ugly chest-deep sobbing, the kind you feel the next day like you did crunches, letting the fear and humiliation and rage spill out where nobody could see it. Then I looked at the clock, wiped my face with my fingers, and took a deep breath. I was still alive. He had taken my money, my sense of safety, and a chunk of my dignity on that roadside, but he'd missed one thing: my mind. That's when the other part of my training kicked in. Not just my dad's how to survive a traffic stop rules, but what he'd been teaching me my whole life about the law. Document everything. Report fast. Go higher when the lower levels are corrupted. So I reached for my phone, scrolled all the way up to the top of my contacts, and hit the one labeled Dad. He picked up on the first ring. "Hey, baby girl," he said, voice warm, like I hadn't just knelt in gravel for a stranger with a gun. "I'm okay," I said, surprised at how steady I sounded. "I'm safe, but something happened." You could hear his whole tone change. In one breath, the father vanished. The Attorney General stepped in. "Where are you?" he asked. "Downtown parking garage, level 3. I said. "About 20 minutes ago, I got pulled over by a city officer named Rick Dean, badge number 7416 on East 14th near that old gas station by the boarded-up laundromat, and..." I walked him through the whole thing, every word, every action, from the fake reckless driving line to the forced kneeling, the sexual comments, the $10,000 in his pocket. I gave it like a report, because that's how my brain was functioning right then, detached and precise. When I finished, there was just silence on the other end for a moment, the kind of silence that feels like pressure building before a storm. "He pointed a gun at you," my father finally said, voice low. "He made you kneel, and he robbed you under color of law." "Yes," I said. Another pause, then, "Did you get his car number?" I looked at the ink I'd scrawled on my palm with a pen I keep in my console, because part of me had known in the moment this couldn't just end there. "Yeah," I read it off. "That's all I need," he said, and now he sounded like the man who'd made crooked mayors cry on the stand. "Stay where you are. I'm activating the Special Investigations Unit. A team will be with you in 10 minutes. Do not move. Do not talk to anyone but them. And Chloe." He paused, and the father came back for half a second. "I am so sorry this happened to you, but I promise you this. The man who did this, his life as he knows it is over. He just declared war on the wrong family, and I am going to burn his world to the ground." That was the twist right there, the part Rick Dean never saw coming when he looked down at me on that roadside, seeing just another black woman who'd be too scared or too tired to fight back. He didn't know that while he was driving to a smoky bar to brag about what he'd done to his bookie, my dad's SIU, this group of quiet, scary, smart former feds and analysts whose whole job is to go after corruption when the normal channels fail, was already in motion. I found out later they had a van outside the bar, a parabolic mic pointed at the back door, recording every word as he laughed about making me look down the barrel of his service pistol and teaching some rich girl in a Lambo a lesson. They pulled his bank records, saw the gambling debts, the payday loans, the threats from his bookie, grabbed the GPS from his cruiser, showing he'd gone straight from robbing me to paying off his debt. When my dad's office called his chief the next morning with a polite little, "We received an informal complaint. Can you look into it?" They recorded that too, every second of the chief coaching him to falsify a report, telling him to say I was aggressive, that I'd threatened him, that I'd sped off before he could complete the stop. They let them build that wall of lies, then they brought a battering ram. Literally. 2 days after the stop, just before dawn, while he and his wife were sleeping in their quiet little cul-de-sac, SIU's tactical team hit his house. Door-blown flashbang shouts, the whole thing by the book, and dragged him out in front of his neighbors in zip ties and boxer shorts, shoved him into an unmarked sedan, and took him to a gray room with no windows, where my dad's people sat him down, pressed play on their laptop and let him hear his own voice bragging about holding a gun on me for $10,000. When they slid a photo across the table of me on my law school graduation day with my dad's arm around me, robe and hood and all, and asked, "Do you know who that is?" And he realized the woman he had forced to her knees on the side of the road was the Attorney General's daughter. You could almost see the moment his brain understood that this wasn't going away with a union rep and a wink from his chief. Fast forward a few weeks and I'm sitting in a courtroom I've sat in before as an observer watching other people's cases, but this time my name is on the file. The charges against him are long and ugly: armed robbery under color of law, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, extortion, filing a false report conspiracy, plus a federal hate crime enhancement because of the language he used when he thought he was safe with his friends. His chief is in the defendant row too for helping cover it up. They play the tapes, the jury listens with headphones, their faces going tighter and tighter as they hear him describe me, hear him laugh about the gun, hear him and his boss plan to turn me into the aggressor on paper. When I testify, I don't cry. Not because there's nothing to cry about, but because I've done my falling apart already in that garage in my mother's arms, later that night in my therapist's office. On the stand, I just tell the story the way I'm telling you now, step by step, what I saw, what I felt, what I heard, what I did to stay alive. The defense attorney tries to paint me like some shady character because of the cash. "Ms. Washington, you were driving a high-end sports car with $10,000 in cash in your purse. Doesn't that seem suspicious?" He asks like he's handing the jury a gotcha moment. I look at him, then at them. I'm the co-founder of a nonprofit that runs arts and legal literacy programs for underprivileged kids. I say that afternoon I was on my way to a charity art auction to purchase a piece for our annual fundraiser. The $10,000 was the cash deposit the seller required. My illicit activity that day was helping children. Sergeant Dean's illicit activity was robbing me at gunpoint because he has a gambling problem. You could feel the air shift again, this time in my favor. It took the jury 45 minutes to come back. Guilty on all counts. The judge looked at him and said exactly what I'd been thinking since that day. You took a badge that was supposed to be a shield and turned it into a weapon. You preyed on the innocent instead of protecting them, then gave him 18 years in state prison. Some people said that was harsh, some said it was too light. You can decide how you feel about that. The city settled my civil suit for a lot more than $10,000, and my father and I used that money to start a foundation that pays for legal representation for people without an attorney general, on speed dial presses for police reform funds, community oversight boards, all the boring, necessary work it takes to change a system that protects men like him. About a year after he went in, my dad got a letter from the warden at the facility where he was serving his time. Some guy he'd arrested years ago recognized him in the yard and attacked him. He survived. But his face, his sense of invincibility, that was gone forever. When I read it, I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel pity either. Just this quiet sense that the universe had finished a sentence I'd started. He built his own cage long before they put bars around him. I told my dad, they just finally locked the door. So here's where I turn it back to you, because I've been talking for a long time, and I want to know what you think was 18 years, a fair sentence for what he did for the gun, the money, the lies, the way he tried to twist reality to save himself. Do you think losing his career, his freedom, his reputation, maybe even his face was too much, not enough, or exactly what happens when you play God with other people's lives and finally get held accountable? And beyond him, what do you think it really takes to fix a system that lets somebody like that rack up complaint after complaint and still walk around with a badge and a gun? Is it training? Is it body cams? Is it outside oversight? Is it something deeper we don't want to admit about who we trust and who we don't? If you've ever seen something like this, lived through it, or even just watched a traffic stop that didn't sit right with you, I want you to tell me in the comments, do you believe the system can ever truly police itself? Or does it only move when someone with power gets hurt? If my story hit you, made you angry, made you hopeful, or just made you think a little differently about the next headline you see, hit like, subscribe, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and then tell me, in your eyes, what does justice look like in a story like this? And did we get anywhere close?